Becoming a digital being. Layer 1.
I often find myself disassociating. I don't believe, or at least hope, that this is due to any specific mental illness. Rather, it seems to me that this feeling, this unfamiliarity with the body I was born into, comes with growing up in the digital era. This video serves to explain this phenomenon and only the ways in which it relates to me personally, the discoveries and theories that I have come up with. We as human beings are meant to communicate with the world solely through our senses. Feel the touch of fruits and berries, see the bright contrasting colors that they exude, listen for any other oncoming predators that might want to steal this delicious meal. We develop these senses to survive in the natural world in just this way. All the senses our body experiences being streamlined into our brains, so that we may better understand our surroundings and form habits to best survive in that environment. Over time, this process led to the development of the human mind, of which I believe to be a consciousness that exists in the metaphysical plane, partly separate from the brain. However, that discussion will be saved for a future video. Instead, what I want to focus on is how this relationship with the natural world, of which served as our connection to reality for countless millennia, has been ruptured. Serial Experiments Lain is a 1998 transcendent anime created by, and I'm probably going to butcher these names, the dream team of director Ryotaro Nakamura, writer Chiaki Konaka, producer Yasuyuki Ueda, and my personal favorite character designer of all time, Yoshitoshi Abe. The story centers around a girl named Lain, of which we see as far back as Episode 1 experiences disassociation to the point of a fractured psyche. This video will assume you have watched the entirety of Serial Experiments Lain. It will contain spoilers for the series, while also not being the centerpiece of the discussion, but rather a vehicle in which I can better understand and convey my own feelings on the matter. Thus, to watch this video, you do not necessarily have to have watched Lain, but just know that some spoilers are ahead. You have been warned.
To become a digital being is to erase your body. A singular consciousness. Now able to more directly connect with the collective. A fluid being with no form. Thought turned into substance.
If you have been in the anime community for a decent amount of time, I assume you have not only heard of the cult classic, but also how Serial Experiments Lain so perfectly captured the essence of the digitization of society we are seeing today. Essentially, Lain predicted what the internet would become all the way back in 1998. And that would be a correct statement. The Wired is an endlessly interesting topic of discussion, not only in the technological sense, but also in a psychological one. I have heard it endlessly proclaimed that Lain predicted how people have a sort of separate persona on the internet, and Lain of the Wired portrays that perfectly. While this is certainly spot on, I actually don't find it to be nearly the most interesting aspect of the series. It seems obvious to me that people would behave drastically different on a platform where they do not have to be physically present, just as we as humans act differently according to the environment or the people we are around. Instead, what I find fascinating is when Lain of the real world and Lain of the Wired become one, when Lain transitions into a digital being. Episode 1 is a bizarre trip. We see that Lain has little to no anchor on reality. It is assumed that this is the point in which she has just been gifted a body in the physical sense. After all, Lain is not from this world, but instead existed as a bodiless entity within the Wired, of which is said to have existed long before computers. The Wired then is not the internet, but instead the collective consciousness of the entire human world, the embodiment of the relationship humans have with nature and amongst themselves. A constant ebb and flow of ideas and personalities, dangers and warnings, that serve to connect everything all at once and form countless individual consciousnesses as bodies interact with it. The internet, then, is this sense of connection brutally streamlined, humans becoming so easily accessible to each other that the whole of the collective consciousness itself is, in a sense, waking up, at least according to the series. Basically, the internet scene in Lain makes the Wired much, much easier to interact with, and they are not the same thing. Lain is born from this massive body, herself bodiless until she is gifted otherwise. Surprisingly though, she begins to gradually settle into her new life, oblivious to the fact that she is anything more than a normal human being. It's honestly very sweet to see her developing relationships. However, when she is reintroduced to the Wired, her psyche begins to fracture. It is revealed there is a Lain of the Wired who seems to be an entirely different being of its own. Eventually, as the real Lain spends more and more time within the Wired, these different personalities become closer to a cohesive whole. becoming a powerful being within the Wired. Lain becomes closer and closer to transitioning into a digital being. This is something I'm sure we can all relate to. As we spend more and more time on the internet, gaming, socializing, watching YouTube videos, we become closer to digital beings ourselves. To best explain this, I will discuss Twitter and YouTube specifically. All I need to make a tweet is my hands and my mind, and I'm sure they're not far off from making a direct phone-to-brain interface. My body is hardly needed in this process, yet I am certainly connecting with the world just through the act of scrolling through my phone. In fact, it can be said that I am closer to the world, the human world, by doing this than I would be if I were to go outside. That's a scary thought. By then using the internet like this, it is almost as if I am forsaking my body and becoming an ethereal existence. The same thing Lain is told to do in episode 1. In a sense, my consciousness is not one of spatial awareness, reading body language, waving my hands around to talk like the crazy Italian I am, but instead my mind becomes the tweet. My thoughts, of which make up my mind, are being uploaded directly back to the Wired, to the collective consciousness. As you are watching this YouTube video, you are not talking to me. You are instead listening to a digital recreation of my voice, looking at animated footage that I've selected. Yet it cannot be said that I am not communicating my thoughts to you. In a sense, we are two ethereal beings having a one-on-one discussion by directly uploading our thoughts and emotions to a server somewhere in space. It's the same with texting or tweeting or commenting on a Facebook status. Even as I type this script, my mind feels more in tune with the lines on the page than it does with the husk that is clacking on the keyboard. Perhaps all fiction is like this. It is no wonder then that when I sometimes look in the mirror, the reflection that stares back at me is not the shape I had thought it would be. We as humans have that innate desire to affect the world around us. However, the global pandemic that is still present in the world has forced us to stay inside, at least initially. Of course, this only serves to expedite the transition towards a digitized face in the mirror. Instead of affecting our environment by crushing the grass between our feet and picking berries off a bush, we are instead attempting to change the political views of others on Twitter. We must affect something. This is not even to mention the instant gratification we lust after. Every time I post a video, I check the views every 10 or 20 minutes, refreshing over and over, waiting to feel as if one more person has acknowledged my thoughts. The more they do, the more my digital self, my own Lain of the Wired, gains power. We become addicted to the sense that we have changed the world, and are given hope because we, in theory, can do so with just a single tweet. This addiction is especially problematic when going on our phones is how we start our days. As we blink the sleepiness out of our eyes, not yet fully conscious, we gradually wake up not by the light of the morning sun, but the synthetic light of the screen. When our conscious self then fully awakens, it does so within the Wired instead of the physical world. The concept of giving up our bodies and becoming ethereal entities is not new to science fiction. It has been a staple of cyberpunk since even before Ghost in the Shell. However, Serial Experiments Lain handles it in a unique way. The titular character is constantly called towards the Wired, eventually forsaking her body altogether as her physical self fully coagulates with her Wired self. She returns to where she was born. And perhaps that is the draw, a reason that goes beyond simply wanting to affect the people and the world around us, and the internet making that easier than ever. Just as Evangelion supports the Freudian notion that we wish to return to the mother's womb, Lain claims we as humans wish to return to the ethereal womb, of which has existed far longer than even spoken language. The collective consciousness, the Wired. The existence that we were all born from, as our relationship with it eventually filled up our physical husks with experiences and memories, instincts and language. The ebb and flow of knowledge and thought forming the minds that we all call home. But I reject this notion. I now believe that we are innately tied to our physical selves, that we were always meant to communicate with the world with our hands and senses. That not doing so is inherently and fundamentally incorrect, and is the reason in which doing so results in a distinct dissociation. That we dare not forsake our bodies and truly become digital beings. I say this as I type away on my keyboard, alone in my room, staring at the screen, attempting to communicate with you on the server in space, as I yell out my thoughts into an endless void of which connects us all.